welcome to the next episode of Language Talks. I'm glad today to have with us an independent writer, translator, editor, and proofreader who works in languages English, Hindi, and French. She addresses a range of topics in her work. Let us have a discussion with her. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Lalita. Thanks a lot for having me here. It's a
I
pleasure.
would like to start by asking you create content for various platforms. So can you tell us about your creative process when you develop content in multiple languages?
Yeah. So generally, as a content writer, whenever I have a client, I am given a brief by the client. So that can be in written format or verbally, and they describe the service or the product that they want to promote or introduce, and they give me an idea. They would have studied their target audience, and they know whom they are addressing. So based on that, they have a particular, you can say a particular tone in which they want to, present themselves. So they tell me all that, and if they have pictures or visuals or videos of their product or their service, they share that as well, so that it gives me a fair idea. And then I study that a little bit. Whatever information I have, I go through it very well, and then I get to work. So then I create my, and they also indicate the length of whatever they want, which platform they want it on. So according to that, I calibrate my content.
That is great. And is there a research process involved from your side?
Usually it's whatever they supply, and if it is a company, of course you visit the website and you study a little bit more about them, where they come from, what kind of image they would like to portray, what kind of, I do need to sometimes look at their market and kind of assess what they might be expecting, what the customer would be expecting, so that I can reach them more directly, as directly as possible. Yeah.
I see. Nice.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Interesting, yes.
Yeah.
So while doing so, how do you approach the cultural sensitivity when you create this content?
Yeah, cultural sensitivity normally comes within the realm of localization. So especially if it's a different language involved, then you have to see what, there are phrases, expressions, things that relate to their ethnicity or their locality or their culture, basically. And if you're familiar with that, it's that much better. Sometimes you have to research quite a bit to be familiar with that. And then you localize your language accordingly as much as possible, so that you relate better.
So there is a lot of talk about localization and content writing now.
Oh yes. Yeah, now localization is a big thing because the world has become so small. So, they expect that everyone should be able to connect very directly.
Right. They want it in their local language, as they say.
As much as possible. I mean, naturally, because then you're far more accessible, far more identifiable, and they can identify with you, with your product, and so that gives its benefits.
Okay.
Gone are the days when we used to look at foreign products, and we had a certain image of those foreign products, and often there was a big gap between that, but sometimes that used to be the draw. Now that isn't such an intrigue for anybody, because everyone is familiar with everybody's cultures and all that, so then they want something that they can relate to.
Okay. Do you think social media is helping us in localizing the products or understanding other cultures better?
Oh, greatly. I mean, it's an advantage that I think while we were learning foreign languages, we never had. Except for foreign teachers, maybe occasionally cassettes or videos that they used to bring from there and play for us in our institutes or whatever. That was our only exposure, or the occasional film festivals or things like that. But now it's on your keyboard literally, so you just have to key in whatever you're looking for, and there it is. So a world of a difference.
Yes. So you mentioned learning French at a time when there was no internet, I think.
There was no internet.
Okay, how was the scene back then?
I mean, at that time, even computers were at the MS-DOS stage.
Oh.
So you can imagine. It was like we literally learned from our books and from our teachers. And I guess if we were focused, we learned. If we weren't focused, we didn't learn. So that was how it was. But our teachers were everything. They were the image builders for, whatever attraction we had to that language or any other like interface that we had with that language was our only source of information.
I see. So how did you pick up French? Why French?
I started in school basically to get away from having to learn Marathi, which I was miserable at.
Okay.
I was very bad at Marathi and Hindi. I was very bad at Hindi and Marathi because I started learning the script rather late in life. I was in my 5th when I was introduced to the script. So I was always catching up. And because of that, although I never realized that I had a skill for languages, but at that point I used to think I was really miserably failing at both Hindi and Marathi. So in the 8th standard, when we were offered the option of either learning French or the regional language, I opted for French as an escape. But then I was doing well at it and it was very similar to English. I picked it up easily. My sister was learning French, had learned French rather. So she used to talk a little bit in French and that used to be interesting. So I think I picked up, and then after my 12th, by chance, I just joined the Alliance Française for a summer, summer course kind of thing. And there was a fantastic teacher there. He was the head of the Alliance at that time in Pune, which is where I studied. So one Monsieur Jacques Vallée, I still remember him to this day, some 35 years later. And he was so impressive, the way he taught, and the kind of broad view that he gave of the wider world. It was amazing. And so I think basically it was me idolizing him so much that I decided I'm going to study French a bit more. So after that course, which was just a month or a month and a half, after that we had to select in the first year of our college what we wanted to do. So I went for French. It was a leap in the dark and against my parents' advice and everything. But then, they said, what will you do after studying French? There was no scope as such at that time, except for teaching. But and even teaching was limited because the teachers who were there quite permanently. So there seemed to be very little scope for it at that point. But I took it up anyway because it was the only thing I was good at also. So that made it easier for me. Yeah.
True. You followed your passion.
Yeah. Can't call it my passion. At that point it wasn't my passion, but it was something I was better at than at other things. I was good at English and at French, and certainly not good at maths. I had economics as my other subject, which was alright, but I was not greatly interested in that. So yeah, you can say it was one of my interests.
Yes, I think at that age we don't realize.
Yeah, we don't. Especially in India, we are not, taught through school to discover our own talents or our own interests. We just learn because we have to learn, and that was the attitude I went in with. But then I started enjoying it. When we started reading literature and all that, I started enjoying it, and I was grateful that I had made this choice. Yeah, it's very difficult to study things that you're not interested in, as we know.
You're right. So nowadays we see a lot of content creation work that is being done. What tips can you give to aspiring content writers or content creators?
5-6 very important things which I have learned the hard way, but which I think if I had known at the onset I would have been better at. First of all is that you have to keep yourself updated at all times. Just keep reading whatever you can, listening, watching movies, and and keeping up to date with technology. That is absolutely indispensable in any field, but especially in our field, because we have all our terminology bases and those translation tools and things like that. So I started learning all that very late in my career, whatever I worked. So I started translation by error almost. Just somebody who came to know that I know French, so he asked me to help him. And then I did a lot of, I just jumped into it, without knowing what I was going in for. And my first project was about, with a company which was into mining and exploration in the Congo. So all of their data was what I translated. And that's when I realized that, I didn't even know of the existence of translation tools. So I started from scratch. I read their work, and then from the first sentence onwards, I literally translated it word to word, pen and paper. And it was like, it took a long time, you can imagine. So those are things. Then another tip I can give is to not miss on any opportunities. But sometimes we stop ourselves. We have these self-limiting ideas that we're not good enough. But you never know if the others, the competition that you have in your present situation is any better than you. So why miss a chance? You should always give it a go, whether it's interpretation or a chance to, go to a foreign country or meet people, talk to them. However broken your language is, nobody holds it against you. People speak to us in rotten Hindi and in rotten Marathi, but we always appreciate that effort, right? So in the same way for foreign languages, I think we should just not have that hesitation to learn.
We have that concept in our mind that I will learn more and then I'll speak more.
And when I'm perfect, I will speak. Yes. And we never are perfect. Yeah, after all these years, I cannot say I'm perfect. I'm like sadly lacking in my knowledge of French. But there's always scope to grow, and the only way to grow is to keep improving yourself. Yeah, whatever way you can. Yeah.
Yes. So in this multilingual and multicultural context, I think these tips will be very useful. As a translator, how do you maintain the tone and style of the original content when transferring the content to a different one?
Yeah, it depends on what the content is about. See, if it's something legal or if it's something administrative, there's not much scope to change anything. You can't. There is not much leeway because a slight difference in the meaning of the word will change the meaning of your entire document. It could. So you stick to the given original text as much as possible. And you stay loyal to that. But when it comes to literature, there is a lot of scope, in the sense that if you are in touch with an author, then of course you can discuss whatever you think would be better. And depending on how the author receives that, because many authors are very too proud to allow any changes. But if an author understands that it is the better thing to do, then you can make some changes. Basically, like you said, localization and all plays a role over there. And so then you have a little bit of creative leeway. But so there's a thin line between translation and transcreation. But you have to see who your client is, what you're working for, what the content is about. You don't want to change the meaning. You want to be as faithful as possible to what is intended, because after all, it's the author's work, and you have to stay loyal to that. So I don't try to veer too much from that. But sometimes modes of expression are slightly different in a different language. So then if you have the opportunity to discuss it, that's great. If not, you just stay loyal to what is given to you. That's my way of looking at it, at least.
I see. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about translation and the translation process?
Oh, it's amazing the amount of misconceptions. You must be familiar with it. We struggle a lot to be understood better.
Right.
Basically, the biggest misconception is that it's not a great deal. Translation is easy. You are already given a written work. So the work is already done. You are just putting it in your language. But also the other misconception that goes along with this is that a native speaker will be the best person to translate. Which, as we all know, in our own languages, our proficiency has much to improve, much room for improvement. So in our own native languages. So suppose I am a Hindi speaker at home. It's not necessary that my vocabulary will match up to my to a language which I have studied.
Right.
For example, we all in India, almost all of us, educate ourselves in English. So our English is usually better than our our own native tongue, isn't it? So right from that, we are by nature, most of us Indians are bilingual, at least, if not multilingual. And so we know this better than most people, that native speakers may not be the best speakers. And so that's a misconception which is very difficult to fight. I mean, in the market, you'll see all the demands have it written over there. I mean, there is all that thing about inclusiveness and all that, but then it all goes out the window the moment it comes to speaking a language. They say we want a native speaker, and there they've cut out all of our market straight away.
Yes.
And so it's a difficult thing to fight against. And there are other misconceptions that it doesn't take time, that it doesn't take much effort. They don't realize that we've invested about almost our life, in a whole lifetime of studies into this language to be able to understand it to your to the level of your source language. Our target language skills and our source language skills have to be at par almost, which is difficult to achieve, but people don't realize that. So unless they start doing it, they will not realize it.
Can you share a particularly challenging or interesting translation project you worked on and how you approached it?
My most challenging and most interesting project, I think, was the first one that I did. Like I was telling you, it was about mining and geology. So geology was never my subject, and I knew very little about Africa as it is. So I had to study everything from the geographical setting, the geological terms and terminology and everything. And because that company had only me to who knew French at that point, all of their communications related to their investments or whatever, everything was done by me. So at the same time, like while I was translating their data, their geological data, I was also translating all of their communications, all of their administrative letters and things like that. So I had a whole lot of fields that I was suddenly thrown into, and that was my first project. So I was literally at sea, and at the same time I had just had a baby, so I was nursing and literally burning the candle at both ends and sitting up nights, and like there was no day and there was no night. I was just working and working, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a whole new world for me, and it was very interesting.
It opened doors for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had never thought I'm married to an army man, so from Pune we went to the back of beyond into Assam. I'm sorry to put it that way, but that is how it was as far as work goes. So it's a beautiful place and all that, but there was no scope for working over there. So, and plus it was the heart of insurgency at that point in time, many years ago. So we weren't free to roam around or look for work or do anything like that without a whole lot of guards with us and things like that. So it was very inhibiting to look for work also over there. So after all that, I found this really refreshing.
What role does editing play in ensuring the quality of work?
Editing it's very, very important in the sense you cannot present your work and presume that it is error-free. Without having edited it, it's not at all advisable to submit your work, to give it in for any kind of assessment or acceptance. Because no matter how good we are, even if we are writing in our own languages, in that translation from your thought to your written presentation, there is a lot of slip. And you have to reread, edit it, and keep finding, the more you are meeting the targets of whatever you set out to do, the better it is. So it's very, very important to edit. And lots of errors you'll find that just one go of editing is not sufficient. Usually you have to do it several times.
Okay. So while doing this, how do you strike the balance?
Important thing, you can't be unfaithful to your author. Because after all, he or she is depending on you to put it across, put their thoughts or their content across to their public as faithfully as they have thought it or as faithfully as they intend to. So you can't play with that. You try to stick as much to it as possible. as far as grammar, syntax and those things go, of course your language will be slightly different from the original language, and you do need to explain those things sometimes. But yeah, it can't be a verbatim translation. Like it can't be literally word to word, because then sometimes it will not make any sense. So that I think it's a kind of balance that you just have to incorporate in your work.
In addition to editing, proofreading is also, I think, a very important.
Equally important. Oh yes.
So can you tell us about it?
Yeah, throughout our school, I think we learn proofreading from all our dictation tests and punctuation marks in our grammar exams and things like that. But believe me, you use every bit that you learn in school. You use that in proofreading, and you need to do it. You need to do it constantly, consistently, all the time. So its importance cannot be, you can't reduce. You can't reduce the importance.
Right. Can you share some common mistakes you have come across during your proofreading work?
Yeah, you come across a lot of mistakes. I mean, they are usually unintentional, but many are there simply because a person may not be so sensitive about grammar as you are. So people who correct too much of another person's grammar is known as a grammar Nazi nowadays. So we are very particular about those things. And because that is one of my lines of work, I take proofreading quite seriously. And I think all the grammar that I learned in school has been very, very helpful, and still it has not been enough. I am always learning. So the errors that you normally come across, first of all, are spellings, lots of them. And then simple things like, not matching your verbs, not making them agree to your subject. You will have a singular in the subject, but then your verb is plural. Yeah, like he tries, but then instead of that you will read that he trying or something like that. So it's just not matching. So those kind of errors are there. They are frequent. Then, and of course now with the autocorrect feature in most of our of our tools, autocorrect usually auto wrongs it. So then you end up correcting all of that all over again.
Yeah, that becomes a nuisance sometimes.
It does become a nuisance, and the more of the tools you use, the more you're surrendering yourself to errors. So it's better to correct it yourself as you go.
Manually, yes.
Yeah, manually. I'm not a great believer in technology as far as language goes, but yes.
We have to use it carefully. Maybe.
You have to use your own judgment, and everything you have to use your own knowledge and your own judgment, because only you know what has to be conveyed. So I think you're the best. You're your own best proofreader.
Right.
Yeah, usually.
Now about your teaching of French language, you have taught French across various age groups. So can you describe some of the challenges that you must have faced?
Yeah, it has always been very challenging for me, because you know how they say you should never say never. I used to say, when I was learning French, I used to say I'll never become a teacher, because I always thought, I'll go off to France or something, or to some francophone country, and I'll find some work which I'm interested in, but I will not teach. That was the image in my childish head back then. But the more you say never, you end up being stuck with that. So, so repeatedly I've been stuck with no other option but to teach. For example, when my husband keeps getting posted from place to place. In some places there is no scope for any kind of employment except for teaching. So you take that up just to keep sane and stay in the workforce kind of thing. Right. And so I've taught off and on. I've taught in some of the best schools, especially in Delhi. I've taught at Sanskriti, at Mount St. Mary's, then at the British School, which is the British Embassy's school for their employees and all. And it has always been a very enriching experience. There's no denying that. Yeah, there's no denying that, because the more you teach, although you teach at a basic level, it always is encouraging, because you are revising all your basics, and then you're helping somebody to learn the things that you learned in a very difficult way, and you think you made it easier for them. It may all just be my imagination, but I tried always to make it easier for them. And then I tutored also a little bit, so I had some very interesting students. So at the British school, we had a combination of students who had who had joined the school only in their 10th year, which is their O level.
Okay.
And they had no exposure to French. So I was given a batch which was called an ab initio batch. So then I prepared their syllabus for them to be able to catch up from the 7th standard onwards, that is 4 years of French, in 1 year. So I designed that syllabus and I taught it to them. And I'm glad to say that all my students got an A, except for one student who I think didn't submit part of his papers. And I had a Japanese student, 2 Korean students, 1 African student. I had a whole combination of students. None of them were Indian. So I mean, you can't really teach them in English because in India you know which level of English you're learning. And all of these countries have different levels of you can say mastery over the language, over English or whatever. So you're teaching them French in French, and you're teaching them from the beginning to a level where it's like what now I think is called a B2 level.
B2, yes.
Yeah. In our time we didn't have these ABs levels. We used to have certificates and then diplomas and diploma superior and things like that. They weren't called B2 or B1. So like we didn't have this DELF system. Yeah. Nothing much has changed in that. Obviously you can't change a language, but the way of ranking it has changed. So you bring them from scratch up till a B2 level. It's quite a lot to do in 1 year, but I think I managed, and that was interesting. It was very challenging, very interesting. Then I also taught privately. I taught one Chinese student who was giving a CAT exam, a CAT exam in French. So for her, like teaching her all the vocabulary, she had to relate that to all her subjects. That was a deadly challenge. It was really interesting. Yeah. And
that's too much.
It was too much, but amazing, the way some children and I think some systems of education are so geared to achieving that child, she used to put in some limited hours into French because naturally school was ongoing at the same time. And they start their preparation in school for us, which we start after college, but they start in school itself. So they're very, very focused. And she used to come with entire volumes of vocabulary which she had memorized. It was amazing. Like I used to be stumped each time for every class. I also had one student from the Border Reserve Force, or BSF, Border Security Force. They were going on a mission with to Congo from the UN. Through the UN. So he was he was from Himachal and Hindi speaker, and I taught him French. Unfortunately, he died after a couple of years. I read it in the newspaper. I was very sad to hear that. But he was also very, very motivated, and from that, it's like unbelievable that a Jawan will actually learn the language to an extent that he knows that he's going to be posted and his life will be at risk all the time. He has to communicate with the locals and be able to communicate with them. So that motivation was something else to learn French. It was really an eye-opener for me also. Those were interesting challenges and interesting experiences of teaching that I had.
Nice. Thanks for sharing them.
Yeah. I'm glad to share it.
You have been in this field for a lot of time. So can you tell us about the changed scenario in the language and teaching field overall?
Oh, it's totally different now. I think we had a very pen and paper approach to or board and chalk kind of way of learning. So we had teachers who would come and write the grammar, put in the write the fill in the blanks on the board, and we would figure it out and write it in our notes. That kind of. Now you can't imagine that kind of thing. You begin with that and that's done in 5 minutes. Like kids just have their own tablets or their telephone, their phones or whatever, and they learn much faster, obviously, because they have access anytime that they want, they can access any information they want. They don't wait for the teacher to tell them. So it goes much faster, and so it's a lot more challenging, I think, for the teacher, because you have to cater also to different levels of interest and different levels of learning at the same time, which we didn't have as long as we were doing the pen paper system. Everyone was at the same level. But once they have gadgets with them, they go at their own pace. Each student has his or her own pace. So those who are very motivated, or those who are talented in this, in picking up languages, or those who have any inclination to learning it, they learn very, very fast. So automatically you have to stagger your level of teaching. You either teach very basic students, at the same time you have students who are average, you teach them, and at the same time you have high achievers, so you're teaching them. So you have to plan your lessons accordingly, and it's a lot more challenging than a normal lesson used to be earlier. And it's a great thing for learners, because then they have a very immersive kind of experience while they're learning. So they kind of experience the culture of, for example, of France. So when they're learning, they know how French is spoken in France. They know it's spoken slightly differently in Africa, slightly differently in Asia, Southeast Asia. So they learn all that even while they're at the basic level of learning French. And they learn spoken French much faster. We had to really struggle to be able to speak. Our French was entirely, textual and related to question answers, things like that. We didn't really practically use our French. So when we were put in situations where we had to use our French to speak, it was very, very challenging. It was like we used to find our tongues very tight when we had to speak in French. But now it's much easier for students to, they can watch movies, listen to songs. They can interact with people directly on their phones through social media. So they learn far more immersively than we used to.
Okay. Wow, that was a lovely discussion.
Yes, it was. I enjoyed it. I did all the talking though. Didn't give you a chance.
No problem. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you too. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.
All the best for your future projects.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Huma.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye. You too.